Hi everybody, Tom here. Going to take a few minutes today to have a look at the process for creating trial environments for Dynamics 365 for Talent. A few reasons why you might want to do this. First of all, of course, they're a great option if you're trying to learn the features or there's something that you want to try out or get to know the updates. Second, of course, demos, and the third, prototyping with customers. So it's a very useful thing to have. If you hear any background noise over the course of this recording, my apologies. It's school kicking out time here, and I live on a road with 3 schools on it, so it's quite noisy outside the window. Okay, so we're going to go through 6 steps. We're going to create an Office 365 trial, create some users, deploy a talent trial, warm up the apps, assign some licenses, and then create some Chrome profiles. That last step is really optional, but it's a great tip if this is something you're doing a lot, as it will make your life much easier. So the first thing we're going to do is create an Office 365 trial. The benefit of doing it in an Office 365 trial tenant rather than your production tenant is that you can deploy all sorts of other trial licenses into this tenant as well. So if you want to have a look at Power BI or Power Apps, you can spin both of those up on a trial version as well. Now I always get to my Office 365 trial via this excellent blog post by Usher. You can get to these pages within the Microsoft site as well, but I'll be completely honest, I find them very, very difficult to locate, whereas this blog post happily pulls them all out for you. 2 different versions of Office 365 that you can trial here, E3 or E5. Personally, I prefer to always go for E5. I'm going to put the link to this blog post in the notes underneath the video so that if you need to get to it, it's easily accessible. But I have it as a favourite and I'd recommend you do the same. So I'm clicking on E5, I get straight into this page. Now when I'm clicking out this, filling out this get to know you page, I'm not filling that in for myself, I'm filling that in for a test user. I'm going to cover up the screen here just so that you can't see things like my mobile number. If you need it, I'm sure you already have it. And I would fill this in always for a kind of fictional test user. I've used people like Harry Potter and various authors, but these days I go for more normal sounding names because I find they look a bit more impressive and a little bit more professional in demos. So I'm just going to walk through. You can pick the organization size, but it doesn't really matter. You're then putting in your user ID and your fictional company name. Now this needs to be something fairly memorable for you because it's something you're going to need to keep coming back to. I'm going to again create the password and then reiterate that password down below. Again, make sure this is something memorable because you're going to need to keep coming back to this later on. You can tick all the boxes or untick all the boxes about having Microsoft contact you. Personally, I think they get enough of my data. And then you can hit create your account. Then you have to prove you're not a robot. Now you need to put your actual mobile number in here because they will use it and you will be prompted for a verification code. Just takes a few seconds to come through. This is all real time, so you can see it is really, really rapid. And there we go. So now I have to sit and wait for a couple of seconds while this all spins up. In the meantime, I can make a note of that sign-in page and that user ID because remember, this is something I'm going to need to keep revisiting. Personally, I use RoboForm for holding my passwords, and every time I spin up a new trial environment, I'll create a new safe note in RoboForm which holds all these details for me. As you can see, it's already setting up my account, so things are happening fairly quickly. There is a point later in the process where it's safe to go and make a cup of coffee and have a bit of a break, but the early parts are pretty rapid. So now I hit Start Setup, and it will take me through into the Office 365 admin area, and I'm presented with 2 options. The first one is connecting a domain I already own, but I'm going to just go through and continue using my onmicrosoft.com domain for now. And then I'm going to skip the setup options and go straight to add the users myself manually. If you add users from within the setup guide, it will give you some strange options around passwords, which if you're going to use all those user accounts yourselves is a bit of a pain, so I recommend doing it this way. Within the Office 365 admin portal, there's a user option. I'm going to open that up and I'm going to hit the active users link. You can already see my user who created the tenant, the trial tenant is already there, so I'm just going to put in another test user. I always use Sarah Davis for some reason, and we're going to give Sarah a username. The password settings, I'm not going to allow the password to be auto generated. I'm going to set that manually, and I usually set it for demos as just the same as my admin user, just because it's easier to remember. And make sure that you don't require this user to reset their password when they log in, otherwise you're going to have to keep remembering those passwords. Just minor things. Remember, this is a trial environment. I'm not going to put any real data in it, so actually security isn't that important to me at this stage. So I skip through the other options till I get the green tick that Sarah's been added, and then I'm happy with that and I can close it. So I've now got 2 users, and you can go in and add as many users as you want at this stage. So now I'm going to deploy my talent trial, and I'm going to use again Chris, my admin user's credentials, to deploy that talent trial within my Office 365 tenant. To do that, I'm going to go to a web link which is trials.dynamics.com, and I'm doing this again within the private web browser session that I did the initial Office 365 setup from. Enter Chris's work email, having selected talent as the trial environment you want to deploy. And again, put a phone number in. Now, I usually put my own number, which is why I'm greying out this section, but to be honest, there's no verification process, so you could probably put in anything you want at this point. It doesn't really matter. Once you've done that, hit Get Started. You get the same things about privacy and Microsoft's contacts and what they can do with your data, and then you just hit Start. Now, at this point, it's going to go away and do a fair bit of thinking. But when you get to this screen with the D, you know that you're on to a pretty good footing. And it'll think about this for a while. You'll get a screen which says checking user license. There are some talent trial licenses, and your user who deploys your talent trial is automatically assigned a trial license. Later on in the process, we'll go away and look at how you would take those trial licenses and assign them to some of your other users. So once you get to this, everything's fine. This is the point where you can go and get a coffee. This usually takes about 10 minutes. In this case, it was about 8 minutes later. The screen will stay on this. It'll keep refreshing. It'll keep flashing for about 8 minutes. And once you get to the end of this process, the D will disappear. The screen goes white for a few seconds. You can see the URL's changed at the top of the screen. That's your Talent Core HR environment. And then within a few seconds, you should start to see the default dashboard within Core HR start to load. And there it is. So our talent environment is deployed successfully. The next thing you're going to want to do is warm up the apps. Now what I mean by that is, as the admin user, you need to initiate the process of going into the apps, by which I mean attract and onboard, in order to open them up and make them accessible for other users. If you don't do that, you can get some strange behavior, so it's a good habit to get into just doing that. As soon as you deploy a trial environment, go in with your admin user, click on the attract link, as I've just done here. You'll get this kind of building blocks screen while it just sets everything up. This these days runs pretty quickly. It used to be a fairly slow process for trials, but now it's fairly fast. This is all real time, so you can see it's just taking a few seconds here. So once I've got to this screen and attract, I know that the initial attract deployment is done, and then I can come into this drop down menu up the top here, which doesn't want to work today. There we go, and then just click on onboard and go and do the same thing to warm up the onboard app. To be honest, I don't usually bother warming up Offer, but you can do that if you want to, but I tend to stick with just attract and onboard. Offer will warm itself up when you get to it anyway, generally speaking. Okay, so on onboard, once I get to this set your employees up for success screen, unless you want to do the workflow, do the walkthrough, I'll just hit skip. It will take me to the dashboard, and there we go, attract is working, as is Offer. Okay, so now you want to assign the talent trial licenses. So as I mentioned, your admin user automatically has a trial license assigned, but you need to go in and grant them to other users. Remember that the experience apps within Talent do live license validation. So if you've set up other users in the tenant, you haven't granted licenses for them, they won't be able to get into the likes of Attract and Offer. If I open Chris's account here back in the Office admin portal, click on licenses and apps, you can see he's been automatically assigned that Dynamics 365 for Talent license. But I still have 9,999 remaining, so that's good. I can come into my other user who I added, open up the licensing and apps tab, and there you can see that I can just enable that checkbox to assign a license to my other user. So she'll now be able to get in to all the other bits of the system. And of course, actually that means you will when you're representing that user. Now the final stage here is setting up some Chrome profiles, and this is useful if you are the sort of person who is giving demos and you want to be able to jump from sort of one persona to another. Chrome has a really nice feature around that, and I'm just going to show you very quickly how to get that set up here. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually go back into my core HR environment within whatever web browser I set up Talent in. I tend to use Edge as my go-to because I'm a bit of a glutton for punishment. And I'm going to go back to that core HR environment, and I'm going to just copy that URL. So everything at the beginning up to the question mark is my core HR URL. So I'm just going to copy that onto clipboard. Now what I'm then going to do is open a Chrome session, and I'm going to click on this little icon in the top right hand corner, and I have this manage people option at the bottom. Now I'm going to go add person, and this allows me to create a persona for Chris Jones, and this will take with him all his logins, all his passwords into a Chrome profile. So whenever I log on to Chrome using the desktop shortcut as that person, I will automatically have all of his passwords. So again, if you are demoing, it's a really useful thing to be able to do, otherwise the people that are watching your demos don't have to sit there and watch you fill in passwords all day. So quick tip, pro tip, I'm just going to connect to Core HR by pasting that URL into the address bar. Sign in, remember using Chris's Talent Office 365 credentials, remembering that's the onmicrosoft.com email address. Enter the password as well, remember how I said it should be memorable. And once I've connected safely, it's a really good idea, and it's going to take a few seconds just to get that through. It's a really good idea to bookmark this page, because again, it just gives you an easier way in. If you all you have to do is open a desktop shortcut and click on a favorite to go straight into Talent. So I'm just going to add that to the bookmarks bar. Okay, let's have a look at why this is particularly useful. So if I go to my desktop, and I've blurred it so you can't see how messy it is, I'll just pull out this desktop shortcut that's been created for Chris's profile. Oh, don't know where that came from. And I'm going to close the browser which I had open previously. Now you can see if I double click that shortcut, I get into Chris's profile, and I've got a desktop shortcut, and that's taken me straight into the right environment and logged me in as Chris Jones. Now where that's useful is if you've got several users set up representing different personas within your demo or within your testing, because you can very easily stick all of those shortcuts in a folder and have them easily accessible if you need to jump into different roles. Okay, so that's it for today. That's a very quick run through of how to set up Talent demo or trial environments. Remember that you can extend those environments. You can also deploy Power BI or Power Apps trials into those environments using your admin user, which really start to open up the sort of testing, sort of experimentation you can do, and you can really start to find out what the product is capable of. If you want to find out more about Talent, you can always check out my blog, which is tomstalentblog.co.uk. And if you're particularly geeky, you can use the QR code there to connect with me on LinkedIn. Hope that was useful, and speak to you soon.